So you want to buy an electric car. Let's talk about that. So I am an EV owner. I'm part of that community, cult, if you will. And I and my cohorts, we talk about owning electric cars and how great they are and all that kind of stuff all the time. But it's still a technology that's a bit in its infancy. And it's still not quite ready for prime time for everybody and for every use. So I wanted to kind of do a video just here, kind of chatting casually as I do on this channel about this topic, because there's a lot of cheerleading that I and other people have done. But I feel like it doesn't always reflect the reality of the, let's say, average person or people in specific niches that want to have an electric car and don't really know what the options are there, if there are options at all. But let's start with the elephant in the room, which is a lot of people will say, you know, I think electric cars are great, but I'm never going to get one until they're as cheap as gas cars. I hear this a lot. And let me say, perfectly fair point. The fact of the matter is, EVs right now, in general, are more expensive than your basic average gas car. I do sometimes try to make myself aware when we're talking about, when a new EV comes up and it's in the $30,000 range, and all of us EV enthusiasts are like, wow, that's $30,000. That's so cheap. And for the vast majority of people, $30,000 for a car is a lot of money. Like sometimes I think about the fact that I spent what I spent on my Model 3 and I'm just like, oh my God. And there's always the argument that EV enthusiasts, like myself, I've made this argument many times. There's an argument that we make. There's an argument that we make that EVs over the life of the car cost less money because of fuel charges and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. And that is absolutely true. But when it comes down to it, having a monthly payment it affects a person's life in a certain way. You know, if you've got a $700, $800, $1,000 car payment, it doesn't feel like a cheap car. You know, that is still something that impacts your ability to get through the month and put food on the table, you know? So I kind of feel like I need to, I don't know, atone a little or something for not acknowledging the fact that I guess I am in a position of privilege. I know that's a word that gets people's hairs raising, whatever. But the fact that I do well enough in what I do to be able to afford an electric car is not something that is true for a lot of people. And I want to acknowledge that up front and say that for some people, it's just probably not going to be an option for you. Now, that's not to say that there aren't budget-friendly options out there. And there will be more budget-friendly options, not just because the cost of EVs is going down, but also as used car markets begin to have some actual inventory in them and whatnot, you're going to actually see some less expensive EVs that you could actually afford to get in. I tell the story a lot that when the car that I drove before my Tesla was literally, it was a 13-year-old Volkswagen Jetta, and it was underwater. Like it needed so many repairs done on it. It was far more costly to make these repairs than what the car was actually worth. But you know, the Model 3 rollout was slow and I didn't really have any control over when I was going to get that car. So I was kind of just hanging on for dear life. And it got to this point where it was like, I was debating getting a new car before the Tesla was available. And I looked into a Fiat 500e, and those are available for $10,000. I think the one I looked at was high 8,000s. It was just below 9,000. Now, look, it's a tiny car and it only went like about 100 miles maybe. But if you just need a daily commuter, something to get you to and from work, you don't have kids, you don't have to carry a bunch of stuff, that'll get the job done. And it'll do it for a very, very low price. But I do want to stress, if you are, a single parent and you're working a couple of jobs and you got a few kids, you're going to have a really hard time finding an EV that's going to fit your budget and your lifestyle. I wish that weren't true, but it just is. At the moment, it just is. All right, so then there's charging. Now, I have a garage that I can park in, and super lucky, right next to where I park my car was the power panel. What do you call it? The switch box, the fuse box, the breaker box, the electric box. Anyway, I tried next to my car. So it didn't cost me a lot of money to get a level 2 240 volt outlet put in right there. And I did that at first, then eventually I got an actual Tesla charger little model unit, and that got installed in there. But the first thing that I did was I put in a 240 volt adapter. Not adapter, plug. And that was super lucky for a lot of different reasons, that I even had a garage, that it was so close to that box and it was able to put it in for relatively inexpensively. A lot of people, it's going to cost a lot more, maybe because your box isn't anywhere near your garage, or because you don't have a garage at all. Now, if that's the case, and maybe you have a driveway and you can run a power line out to your car, you can do that on a 240 volt, or you could just do it on a level 1 120 volt. It's not ideal. It will basically mean that you would have to charge your car all the time whenever you have it at home. But it still gets the job done. When I first got my car, for several months, I didn't have anything more than the 120 volt outlet in my wall. And it's basically, you get home, you plug your car in, and you just leave it plugged in. And it will trickle charge. It will take forever, but your car's parked 95% of the time. So, I mean, assuming you don't drive for a living, that's manageable. It is manageable. Now, let's say you live in an apartment and you have to park on the street and there's no way to plug in your car where you live. I'm going to be honest, it's not the best situation. I still want to see the charging infrastructure get built out, not just with supercharging and fast charging level 3 type charging situations, but also just level 2 charging in garages, at office buildings, at malls, at stores. You should be able to just park your car, plug it in when you go into work, and have it charged when you get home. We're not there yet, though. So I think the next question would be, if you don't have a garage or a place to charge at your home, would be to look around and see if there are any charging stations anywhere near you. And there's actually, depending on where you live, if you live in the city, there might be one pretty close by. And a lot of times they're in places where maybe there's a coffee shop or something like that, a place where you could plug in, and you might have to go into the coffee shop and hang out for a little while. Again, this might be even more challenging with the COVID situation right now. Some coffee shops you can't actually hang out in. But if you live in a city, you probably would have access to some semi-nearby charging capacity. Again, it's not the most ideal thing, because it would require you every once in a while to park your car and go into some restaurant or place and hang out for a little bit. But if you can work on a computer and get some work done, it's not that bad. Ultimately, I think that's where things are going to get to, where just like it's a paradigm shift, because right now, if you have a gas car, you go to a gas station and you put fuel in your car at that location. With electric charging, because electric infrastructure is so ubiquitous, I think it will eventually get to where it's like the electric charging, the fuel comes to you. It just kind of comes to wherever you are, wherever it is you park your car and go do your business or do your shopping or whatever. You can just plug in, get a little charge, and you got another day's worth of charge there. But again, we're not quite there yet. So if you don't have a garage and you don't have a place to charge at your house, you would just have to look around and see if there's a fast charging solution somewhere nearby. You might be lucky and you might not. And if you don't have that option, or if you live out in the country, if you're not in a city where there might be ubiquitous charging stations around, you're going to have trouble with that. It's going to be difficult. Now, to step back just a little bit, if you have a 2-car house, it makes 100% perfect sense to get an electric car. Have one electric car, have one gas car. And that way you have your electric car for all your daily commuting type stuff, and you have a gas car if you need to make a long drive somewhere. But back to the living in the city versus the country thing. So my family lives out in the middle of the country, and I still have some trouble with getting to them, because specifically where my dad lives, there's no place to charge between here and there. None. So if I go there on a day trip, if I'm just popping in and popping out, it's about 120 miles or so. So, even though my car is rated to be getting, 310 miles per charge, anybody that has an EV can tell you it doesn't quite always live up to that. Ever. So it gets a little hairy if I'm going there and coming back. Now, if I'm staying overnight, I can plug in his garage, and it'll be good to go by the next morning. But if I just go and visit and come back, it's tight. It's pretty tight. So if you'd have lived in a small town and there were no charging stations anywhere around, which there aren't, it's going to be more challenging for you unless you have a car with a really high range to it, which of course is going to cost a lot more money. Now, if you are a contractor of some kind and you need a utility truck, we're still not quite there. The Cybertruck is supposedly on its way. We don't know when it's actually going to get here. There's very little chance it'll actually get here this year, but most likely next year. Rivian is supposed to finally hit the road this year. There's a lot of options that are like just about to get there when it comes to electric pickup trucks. The F-150, the Bollinger, there's many of them, but none of them are anything that you can just go out and buy right now. So hopefully in the next 2 years, if you are a contractor and you need a work truck and you want to go electric, I think once it gets there, actually, it'll be a great option, because any kind of situation where you're driving a lot, over time, and especially if you're using it for work, over time, it's going to start to save you money because fuel costs are going to be insane. The fuel savings are going to be insane. So it's on the horizon. If you're a contractor and you need a work truck, it's on its way, but we're not quite there yet. And let's say you have a family. There's a lot of the CUVs, I guess, that are coming out. There's the Model Y. The Ford Mach-E is sort of in that category. There's not a lot of like SUV, like full-size electric models right now. The I-Pace might fit that category. BMW's iNext, I think, is the name of it. It's going to be a full-size SUV. I think there's a Volvo on the way. I think there's what's the other one? Oh, Nissan with the Ariya. Is that right? I may be getting that wrong. The point is, if you need a full-size SUV for electric, your options are still very limited right now, but there are more on the way. I mean, this is a very quickly changing and growing field, and there's going to be a lot more options in the coming years, but we're not quite there with the SUVs. There's a few options, and none of them are cheap. So again, the whole budget thing is out the window. But if you have a family and you want to go for it, there's a few options. They're a little bit tighter, a little bit more in the CUV than SUV space, but there are some options there. So yeah, look, if you want to go electric and there's nothing that really fits your budget or your needs right now, it might just not be ready or time for you yet. But like I said, this thing is changing quickly. And then the next couple of years, there's going to be a lot more models on the road that have not been available before. And the price of these things is going to go down very quickly, especially, as I said before, as a used market starts to build up. This is going to only get better. So if you're really jonesing to get into an electric car right now, there's probably some ways to do it. It might not fit every one of the boxes. It might not tick every box that you have in terms of what you want out of a car, but you can find something. But that something is going to be many things very soon. So anyway, I don't know if that was helpful to anybody in any way. I just felt like I just kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit because, like I said, I've been a cheerleader for electric cars for a long time, but there is a bit of a reality there that sometimes gets missed in the euphoria about this thing that we've got. I think sometimes we enthusiasts forget that it's still very much in its infancy. And I think there can also even be a little bit of shaming that seems to happen when people are like, oh, you're still driving a gas car, how dare you? Well, for a lot of people, that's the option they have. And I think we need to be aware of that. But continue to promote what we've got going on here because it's only going to get bigger, it's only going to get better, it's only going to become more available to more people in the coming years. And I look forward to that. And that's all I got to say about that, as Forrest Gump once said. So I'm out. Hope you guys are doing well. Peace.